For 30 years, she stirred the pot in silence. She fed her family. She held back her tears. She kept the heat low, never too much, never enough to boil over. But when her son finally walked away, she made a choice: stop holding back. Let it boil. In Korean families, mothers are taught to endure. But what happens when endurance becomes the thing that burns the house down? People say Koreans have fiery tempers, passionate, quick to explode. But they also say Koreans have incredible patience. They endure anything for family. Those sound like total opposites, right? So which is it? Or is it both? What do you think? Can you be both the fire and the pot that holds it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's begin our story.
An old residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Seoul. The smell of soybean paste drifted over the low wall. Winter sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, and beneath it stood Kim Sune, holding a ladle. Soybean paste stew simmered quietly. Every time bubbles rose, she adjusted the heat out of habit. Can't make it too high. If it boils over, it's wasted. It was just a murmur to herself, but those words held years and years of life. Sune turned 60 this year. Her husband passed away long ago, and she raised 2 children on her own. Her eldest son Tae-soo works at a company, and her daughter Geo is still in college. The 3 of them live under the same roof. But they live on schedules that miss each other several times a day. Tae-soo leaves early for work, and Geo comes home late from overtime and classes. In the end, the only time they sit together at the table is dinner. At that dinner, there was always soybean paste stew on the table. Tae-soo ate his rice in silence, and Geo tested the temperature of the broth. "Mom, it's a little salty today." "Is it? I'll add some water." Sune picked up the ladle and poured in a scoop of cold water. In that simple motion, years of patience were buried. Geo looked at her mother's hands for a moment, then lowered her head. Those hands were deeply marked with calluses. Sune had always endured, ever since she was young. Raising 2 kids alone without a husband wasn't easy. She sold fish at the market and stayed up late at night, doing hand sewing, cutting back on sleep. Her days were always filled with things that had to be done. Maybe that's why she didn't talk much and struggled to express emotion. Words like, "good job," or, "it's okay," stayed locked inside her chest. Tae-soo found his mother frustrating. "Mom, why are you always so quiet? Can't you just say things out loud? What's gonna change if I say it? As long as we can eat, that's what matters." The conversation always stopped in the same place. Geo read the room from between them. Before the hot soup even cooled, the air at the table would turn cold first. That day was no different. Tae-soo came home late from work and pushed the door open heavily. He sat at the table with his tie loosened and said, "Soybean stew again? Yeah, you like it. I'm getting tired of it. Work's already stressful, and now this at home too." Sune didn't respond. She quietly set down the ladle and covered the pot. "Then I'll make something different tomorrow." Her voice didn't waver, but there was a faint crack in it. Geo watched the scene and silently set down her spoon. "Oppa, Mom works around the house all day. Don't say things like that. I'm tired too, okay? Why am I always the bad guy?" Tae-soo's voice rose. Sune didn't look at her son's face. She just slowly turned down the flame on the stove. As the fire got smaller, the air in the kitchen grew colder. An old memory flickered through Sune's mind. When she was young, she'd been the same way. She tried to express her feelings to her husband through meals instead of words. But all she ever heard was, "It's cold." So she made a decision. She'd never speak through emotion again. Instead, she'd speak through rice, through soup, through consistency. She lifted the lid and raised the ladle. The broth was just about to boil. Bubbles rippled along the edges, but it hadn't spilled over yet. "You have to watch the heat. If it gets even a little too high, it all spills out." Her low voice circled the kitchen. Geo felt that those words weren't just about cooking. It was this family's way, and it was Sune's life. A life of enduring right up until the boiling point. A patience that stayed hot but never spilled over. That night, Sune sat alone in the kitchen after turning off the stove. Inside the pot, the residual heat slowly faded. Her gaze drifted briefly toward the dark living room. On the table sat 2 bowls. And one more bowl of soup that hadn't quite cooled yet. She let out a small sigh and muttered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll turn the heat down a little more." Those words weren't about cooking, they were about life. And just like the stew that day, the emotions in this house were just beginning to simmer. The morning air was cold. Kim Sune woke before dawn and turned on the kitchen stove. Like residual heat coming back to life inside the stew pot. Yesterday's conversation began to simmer again in her mind. Taesu's words, "I'm getting tired of it." Those words still lingered in her ears. Sune stopped mid-motion as she scooped out soybean paste. "I should make something different today." She opened the refrigerator and pulled out dried anchovies instead of tofu. She wondered if changing the soup would change how anyone felt. But it seemed like if she didn't change something, she couldn't hold on much longer. That morning, Taesu came out later than usual. Gio had already left for school. On the table sat a new soup. Clear anchovy broth. Taesu picked up his spoon and paused. "No soybean paste? I just made soup today. You said you were tired of it yesterday." "I was just saying that. Don't take it so seriously." Taesu turned his gaze away and put rice in his mouth. Sune just quietly looked at her son's profile. His shoulders were more hunched than before. Years of carrying the weight of work had settled into them. She knew her son was struggling. But she didn't know how to reach him. "How's work these days?" "It's fine. Same as always. If it's hard, you can rest a little. Your health comes first. If I rest, who's gonna pay the bills?" "The world doesn't work like that." Sune closed her lips. In the firmness of those words, she could see the son she had shaped. Taesu grew up after losing his father early. From that point on, he believed he had to become an adult in place of his mother. So he tried never to show emotional weakness. But behind that strength, there was always a suppressed anxiety. That anxiety easily transferred to his boss at work, to his family. "I have to watch my step at work, and when I come home I get nagged at. There's nowhere I can just relax." His words came out like he was tossing them aside. Sune just wiped a rice bowl and answered, "I wasn't trying to nag. You don't understand, Mom." At that one sentence, the air stopped. That evening, when Gio came home, the kitchen was unusually quiet. Sune was washing empty bowls, and Taesu had gone into his room and shut the door with no intention of coming out. "Mom, did you and Oppa fight again?" "It wasn't a fight, just things that didn't quite line up." "You're too patient, Mom." "Being patient isn't a bad thing. But the more you hold back, the harsher Oppa gets." Sune didn't answer. She looked at the fluorescent light seeping through the crack in the door. Inside, Taesu's shadow moved faintly. As night deepened, Sune stood alone in front of the soybean paste jar. When she opened the lid, a rich smell spread. In that smell was the weight of a long time. Soybean paste doesn't ripen all at once. It takes time, slowly, waiting. She muttered it like an old saying. But that night was different. Her patience was beginning to shake, little by little. Taesu's cold words, Gio's frustrated eyes, they swirled together in her mind. For the first time, she asked herself, why did I always just hold back? Was that really the right thing to do? A moment later, the bedroom door opened and Gio came out. "Mom, want to go to the market with me tomorrow?" "Why?" "Just because. I don't like that you always go alone anymore." Gio smiled softly. Sune felt comforted by that smile. But at the same time, her heart grew more complicated. I'm making this child worry about me. The next morning, Sune stood in the kitchen again. This time, she put both soybean paste and anchovies in. Looking at the boiling pot, she adjusted the heat. Can't make it too high. But if it's too low, it won't taste right. She stirred the broth on medium heat. Just then, Taesu opened his door. "Mom, what kind of soup is it today?" "I put soybean paste and anchovies together." "Both?" "Yeah. They say it's richer and more savory this way." Sune smiled, but there was something cautious in that smile. That day, a strange peace settled over the table. Taesu kept his words few, and Gio ate quietly. Sune looked back and forth between the two of them. The broth was simmering just right, but her heart was still uneasy. When will it boil over again? That night, Sune sat by the kitchen window. Wind seeped in and the curtain swayed. She opened her palm. Inside were faint marks from hot pots. She murmured quietly, even patience. "I think it's time I learned something new." Those words held a new resolve. She decided that the next morning, before boiling the broth, she wouldn't close the lid. It's okay if it boils. It's okay if it spills over. Instead, she would start speaking. That was her first change. And it would become the first spark. That would shift the temperature of this house. 4:50 in the morning. The kitchen light came on. Kim Sune opened the pot lid, just as she'd promised herself the day before. It was the first time she'd boiled soup without closing the lid. Steam rose and slowly covered the air. She quietly watched that steam, and suddenly a phrase came to her mind. Speak instead of holding back. Today, she'd decided to do just that. Tae-soo woke up later than usual. He'd been up all night checking work emails. Exhaustion spread around his eyes, and stubble had grown on his chin. When he sat at the table, Sune quietly set a bowl of soup in front of him. Soybean paste and anchovy soup. Like yesterday. Smells good. It was a short exchange, but the air wasn't heavy. Still, Sune knew. This peace wouldn't last long. During the meal, she gathered her courage. Tae-soo, about what you said yesterday. I've been thinking about it. Yesterday? About work being hard. I wondered if I was interfering too much. You weren't interfering, Mom. Still, when you said that, I felt like maybe I had. She carefully continued. So, I was thinking. Maybe we could both change a little. Tae-soo paused. Change? I'm going to try to say what I need to say. But I'll also listen to you more. A moment of silence passed. Tae-soo lifted a spoonful of soup, then stopped. Mom, why are you suddenly saying this? I finally get it. I held back for too long, and we grew apart. We didn't grow apart. We're just living our own lives. Those words struck her chest again. But this time, she didn't back down. No, family doesn't just live their own lives. They live together. After those words, the air at the table froze tight. Tae-soo sighed and stood up. Mom, let's talk later. I need to get to work. Okay, have a good day. The door closed, and only that sound remained in the kitchen. Only then did Sune close her eyes. Her fingertips were trembling. But I said it. Today, I didn't hold back. That afternoon, Sune went out to the neighborhood market. For the first time in a while, she was alone without Gio. In the market alley, the smell of fish and people's voices mixed together. Sune walked slowly with her shopping basket. Then she stopped in front of an old tofu shop. The shop owner, Mrs. Choi, was a neighbor a few years older than Sune. Oh, Sune, haven't seen you in forever. Yeah, I've just been busy. Why do you look like that? Something bothering you? My son. Things aren't going the way I hoped. Still, don't hold it all in. Kids these days, if you don't tell them, they don't know. Those words dropped like a stone into Sune's heart. You're right. That's why I'm trying to change today. Mrs. Choi smiled and nodded. Good. You're doing the right thing. People are like soup if you keep the lid on too tight. Something's gonna go wrong. On the way home, the sky was gray. The wind was cold, and people hurried their steps. Sune gripped her shopping basket and muttered to herself, from now on. I'm going to speak up. I won't hide it. That resolve burned in her chest like a small but certain ember. Around dinner time, Tae-soo came home from work. His face showed clear exhaustion, but there was a look of determination. Mom, let's eat dinner together. Okay, I made soup. A strange tension hung between the two of them as they sat at the table. Tae-soo spoke first. Something happened at work today. Was it hard? No, actually. It cleared my head. I said what I needed to say to my team leader. Sune's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Yeah, I've been holding it in, but I couldn't anymore. At those words, she felt a subtle chill. Not holding back, it was the same decision she'd made today. That's good. Tae-soo nodded. But I'm thinking about quitting. Sune dropped her spoon. What? This job. I don't think it means anything anymore. It just feels like I'm hanging on. Tae-soo, that's way too sudden. You said it yourself, Mom. Don't hold back. I'm done holding back too. Sune couldn't say anything. This was the change she'd wanted, but she didn't expect it to come like this. If I hadn't said that. Her fingertips turned cold. Tae-soo added calmly, and it's not just quitting the job. I'm thinking about moving out for a while too. What did you say? I need some time alone to think. Those words fell and split the kitchen open. The soup on the table was simmering subtly. The lid was still open. Sune slowly lowered her head. Okay, if that's what you need. Her voice trembled. She watched his back as he prepared to leave. Repeating to herself, I said not to hold back. But I didn't mean it like this. The door closed, and the house went quiet again. In the kitchen, the broth was boiling, about to spill over. Sune walked up to the pot and turned off the heat. The rising steam slowly settled. But the fire inside her heart didn't go out. She walked to the window and opened it. Cold night air brushed against her face. In the distance, under a streetlight at the end of the alley, Taesu stood with his bags. His shoulders sagged heavily, and his steps were slow. She watched him and murmured, "How much longer does this have to boil before it's done?" And suddenly, the clock by the window pointed to dawn. She quietly stepped back. The next moment, from the kitchen came the sound of water, splat, spilling over. Sune slowly turned her head. Broth was running over the edge of the stove. She just stood there watching. The overflowing pot, the fire that wouldn't go out. All of it felt like her right now. Now it's really started to boil. That night, Kim Sune couldn't sleep. Wind from outside seeped through the cracks in the door and rattled the dishes in the kitchen. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I didn't know. Not holding back would hurt this much." But within that pain, there was a strange certainty. A premonition that something was changing. And that change by the next morning would become the storm that would completely shift the air in this house. Rain began to fall. In the kitchen, the stains from the pot that had boiled over all night still remained. Kim Sune didn't wipe them away, as if erasing them would erase yesterday's conversation too. It had been 2 days since Taesu left. His room was silent. The blanket still held his warmth, but the air was cold. Gio glanced at her mother and asked quietly, "Mom, when's Oppa coming back?" "I don't know. He said he'd come after sorting some things out." "Did he really quit his job?" Sune stopped what she was doing. I'm not sure yet." Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet tremor inside it. The rain grew heavier. Lightning flashed outside the window, and for an instant, the kitchen turned white. Sune closed her eyes in that light. "I can't hold back anymore." She grabbed her bag and left the house. In front of the subway station, Sune pushed through the crowd of umbrellas. She stopped in front of a cafe near the company where Taesu used to work. She quietly made a call. "Taesu, it's Mom. Let's see each other for a bit." A moment of silence. Then a low, tired voice. "Mom, now?" "Yeah, we both have things we need to say." He sighed and answered, "Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. On that rainy afternoon, sitting by the window, Sune clasped her cold hands and waited for Taesu. The door opened, and her son came in, shaking off his wet umbrella. Exhaustion clung to his face. "Mom, why at this hour?" "Let's talk." Sune cut straight to it. "Are you really quitting your job?" "Yeah, I already submitted my resignation." Her eyes wavered. "What about after that?" "I'm thinking about it. I'm going to live alone for a while and sort things out." She bit her lip. "Taesu, that's running away." "No, it's not running. I just want to live like myself." "Is that what you meant by not holding back?" His eyes flashed. "Yeah, you told me to do that too, didn't you?" Those words stabbed her heart like a knife. "That was me telling you not to hurt yourself. I didn't mean throw everything away. You've held back your whole life, Mom. Were you happy?" Her hands trembled. "Holding back isn't always unhappiness." "Then what's the difference? In the end, everything boils over anyway." His voice rose, and people around them glanced over. Sune looked into her son's eyes. Inside them was a light she knew too well, anger and sadness tangled together. "Mom, do you remember when I was little?" "What do you mean?" "The day Dad died. You didn't even cry. You just went to make dinner." Her breath stopped. "That was because you were there. I hated that so much." "You're human. Why did you pretend you had no feelings?" "Back then, I thought I couldn't cry. Someone had to hold it together. That was your way, I guess. But I can't do it." Sune quietly lowered her head. Rain pounded hard against the window. That sound replaced their conversation. She slowly spoke. "I'm tired of holding on to now." Taesu's eyes wavered. "Mom, that's why I tried to learn from you. But if you let go of everything like this, who am I supposed to hold on to?" For the first time, tears welled up in her eyes. "You're crying, Mom?" "Yeah, I guess I need to learn how to cry now." In that moment, all sounds seemed to stop. The rain, the murmurs of people, even the coffee machine, all of it faded away. Sune's tears fell slowly. It was the moment when the weight of all Those years of holding back melted away. Taesu watched those tears without saying a word. And for the first time, like when he was a child, he quietly reached out his hand. Mom. She took that hand. It was warm. But inside that warmth, there was sadness too. I just need some time alone. It's not running away, it's sorting things out. She quietly nodded. Okay, then do that. But promise me one thing. What? Come back anytime. I'll leave the door open. At those words, Taesu didn't answer, but his eyes softened. Sune watched his back as he left. The hem of his coat was getting soaked as he walked into the rain. She slowly stood up. She placed her hand on the window and murmured, "Just because something boils doesn't mean it burns. Maybe that's how it ripens." That night, when Sune returned home, she turned on the kitchen stove. A new pot sat on the table. She carefully added soybean paste, anchovies, and garlic, and began to stir slowly. Steam rose. The smell of the past still mixed in, but today was different. When it started to boil, she didn't turn down the heat. She just watched. Yeah, this is how you get the flavor. After standing there for a while, she slowly set down the ladle. Then the phone rang. Mom. It was Taesu's voice. Can I stop by tomorrow for a bit? Sune was speechless for a moment. Yeah, come over. I'll have soup ready. After hanging up, she smiled. Something tears or steam, she couldn't tell, ran down her cheek. She stood by the window and looked at the sky after the rain had stopped. Between the dark clouds, a faint star appeared. That star shone like an old promise. Holding back, boiling over. In the end, it was all love. She closed her eyes and whispered quietly. And in the kitchen, the pot was still boiling. But this time, it didn't spill over. In the air that night, along with the smell of soybean paste, a strange peace settled in. The next morning, that soup would bring the family back to the same table. It was the last storm in this house and a new beginning. Next morning, a quiet warmth filled the kitchen. The soybean paste stew simmered slowly over low heat, and a savory smell spread above it. Kim Sune stood wearing an apron, holding a ladle. Her movements had a different kind of steadiness than yesterday. Hands that weren't suppressing anything, weren't holding anything back. Just hands carefully tending to life as it simmered. Mom. At the voice outside the door, she turned her head. Taesu was standing there. His face looked much more relaxed than yesterday. Gio hesitated behind him, then followed inside. You came. Sune smiled briefly. Come sit. I made soup. At the table, the three of them sat together for the first time in a while. Morning sunlight poured through the window onto the table. The stew made a soft bubbling sound, and that sound felt comforting. Unlike yesterday's tension. Mom, did you get a new pot? Gio asked. Yeah, yesterday the broth spilled all over, so I just replaced it. That's good. So it won't overflow anymore. It shouldn't. It's okay if it boils over once. But if it keeps happening, it loses its flavor. Taesu quietly lifted the ladle and ate a spoonful of stew. He closed his eyes as he tasted it. This taste. Is it too salty? No. It's just right. It tastes like the way you make it, Mom. His voice was somewhere warm. Sune quietly watched his expression. The tears she'd held back for so long welled up again. But this time she didn't cry. Those tears seemed to have found their place and stayed calm. Mom, I'm sorry. I think I was only thinking about myself all this time. That happens sometimes in life. Because you were always the one holding back, I think I pushed too hard. Holding back isn't always good. I learned that too. Now I've decided to just let it simmer. Simmer? Yeah, my heart. Not cold, not spilling over. Suddenly, Gio burst out laughing. Mom, that's actually really cool. Laughed along. Taesu listened to that laughter and found himself lowering his head. The stone that had been pressing down on his heart for so long was slowly melting away. After the meal, the three of them walked out into the yard together. Thanks to the rain that had fallen all night, the air was clear. Clothes hanging on the line swayed in the wind. Sune looked up at the sky and said, Isn't it strange? After a fight, the sky seems clearer. That's probably like how broth gets clearer after it boils. Taesu said, Exactly. You have to let it boil to get the real depth. Gio laughed and added, Then our family is real depth now. All three of them burst into laughter at the same time. In that laughter, the bitterness and sadness of past years were mixed in. But even that felt warm. Sune looked at her two children and repeated to herself. Heat and holding back, they both came from the same place. Without love, I couldn't have boiled or held back at all. She quietly closed her eyes. Sunlight gently wrapped around her face. In the distance, a bell rang, and wind swept across the roof. That evening, Sune sat alone in the kitchen and wrote in her journal. Today, our table became warm again. Boiling, cooling, it was all our family's temperature. I won't turn down the heat anymore. I've learned how to let it simmer slowly, but steadily. She set down the pen and took a spoonful of stew. Even in the cooled broth, a deep flavor remained. That flavor had been steeped through years of tears and patience together. Outside the window, the sun set. The sky was dyed red. That red looked just like the glow of the flame under the pot in the kitchen. Sune murmured slowly, heat isn't a bad thing. It's the temperature of love. Her smile stayed for a long time. That night, the fire in the kitchen didn't go out. Quietly, but endlessly, it kept warming life. At the end of the story, on their table, there was no more overflowing broth, no more bursting anger. Instead, a warm steam rose quietly toward each other.